Okay. Welcome to the next episode. You have no idea how much stuff I knocked over for this one small stupid gag. But today we are talking about this guy, and this guy alone. Alright. Someone's not going to let me alone again. There we go, now she's down. So, in this episode, we will be covering this guy, the helmet and just the helmet. It's obviously not finished yet, but it's in a state that I can show it. The majority of the helmet is built. There's obviously detailing and cleanup that still needs to be done, but for the most part, it is done. So I showed this a couple places online, mostly cosplay groups and stuff like that. I had some people ask me like where I got the template from. This is all freehand, so that's the process we'll be going into in this. As far as what this helmet is, that I have no idea. I did try doing some research as to what this helmet was in terms of like what version it is and all that, and I have absolutely no idea. There's a lot of variations. I did a ton of research to try and find what kind of helmet it is. I practically just looked on the wiki to see what the Black Templars were, because this is pretty much exclusive to them that I've seen so far. I'm sure someone out there probably knows, but I don't. Like I mentioned in my other video, I have been using this guy as my sole reference for the entire thing. These are the Joy Toy figures. They're very similar to the miniatures, but there's some slight differences, but it is all just basically stylized. Some things are a little more exaggerated and some things are a little more smoothed out or more rounded, but the figure is what I'm using as my reference. So let's dive right into how I did this and how more or less how I fumbled my way to success again, which is what I always seem to do. So I started off by making your basic like duct tape template for my head. I wanted something that fit nice and snug the whole way around, that was very form-fitting. So what I did was took plastic wrap, wrapped my whole head up around from my neck to the top, obviously left my mouth open so I could breathe. I did this with my hat on, not just so I could have a distinct line for the top, but also when I took it off, it was a lot easier to just grab the bill of my hat and just take the whole thing off. Once I had all the duct tape layered on, I tried finding the center line, started drawing, used my hat, especially like the top button on my hat and everything, just to try and find that center line. Then I outlined all my features, so my jaw, my ear. Basically, I wanted to make a tight shell of my head. Once I had that off, cut out the excess, pulled out the extra plastic wrap that was inside, and slowly started cutting everything apart. I did make sure to add a couple registration marks and stuff so I knew how things were going to fit together. Of course, for the dome of the head, I had to lay that down flat. I wasn't too worried about it looking super pretty, so I just found the high points, cut it, pressed it down, found another high point, cut it, and the end result was more or less this zigzagged design. And then I traced all that out to cardstock, just so I had a consistent piece from left to right, which is something I kind of learned to do after a couple mess ups on some previous pieces. Specifically the pauldrons. That was a nightmare. Once I had them all cut out and traced, I only had to trace out the one side again because now that I have a consistent flat piece of paper, I can just flip it and use it for the other half. Once that was all cut out, traced it all to foam and cut it all out. There was no fancy cuts or anything like this. Everything was all straight edge cut, except for the part underneath the jaw. It was a 90-degree bend, so it was a 45-degree cut on both of them, but I ended up taking that out anyway. later on it down the road, so that entire piece wasn't even needed. Once it was all cut out, glued it all together, contact cement both ends, let it dry for a couple minutes, pressed it all together. Yeah, as I was gluing everything, I kind of laid everything out on the table in order. That way all the left pieces were together, all the right pieces were together, and everything was next to where it was supposed to go. It's not something you can always do, but on these smaller pieces, it makes your workflow go a little faster, just because you know what's right next and where it's going. You don't have to search for a piece or accidentally put two wrong halves together or something. Sable's got her ball again. After it's all glued together, I gave it a test fit. It was still a little wobbly and loose in a lot of places. So I added a piece for the forehead. I drew out above right around my eyebrows, just to make a small filler piece up on top. Just like a small little oval saucer piece. It helped hold the top in a little bit. After that, I wanted something to hold the sides a little straighter too. So I've made a little filler piece behind the base of the head and the jaw underneath the ear. That helped stiffen it up a little bit. I mean, I was still using 6mm foam, so it was going to be wobbly. I probably should use something thicker. In the end, I thought I had wasted my time. My idea later was that maybe I could fit it inside the helmet that I make, and then that can be like a good base for everything to hold on to. So I set it aside for that just in case, and I'm glad I kept it and didn't toss it or anything like that, because it did end up saving me in the long run. Feeling like I had wasted like a good couple hours doing that, I figured, okay, I'll start from scratch. I will make another template like I have done before. The issue I had with the helmet that I had made right there was that it was so flimsy, and I had to add a ton of stuff to it, and especially with the visor and all that, and I'll use this as reference. So if you look at the actual shape of this, the helmet comes down and then the visor wraps around slightly in front, but this is all supposed to be one piece, you know, so that entire metal is going to come around the front but then also wrap around that as well, if that makes any sense. It's all one piece that wraps around itself. To get that with what I had there was going to be impossible. I'd be building the whole thing on top of it, and I needed to make a template for that. So that is why I thought I had messed up and wasted time. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have to make this whole thing from scratch, which is fine. I've made everything else from scratch so far except the chest, so I'm familiar with the process, and all of these pieces have been very simple so far. Got a handful of pieces of cardstock, taped them together, and then tried contouring that to the inside of the gorget as best I could. Once I had that down pretty good, the next thing I did was I tried to chest on, slid that into the gorget, and then I traced my head. This gave me an idea of where my head was inside the gorget, so I had an idea of how far back and forward things were allowed to be helmet-wise. Because once I have my arms in the arms of the suit, I can't touch my face. So if I mess up my helmet, I'm going to be kind of doing one of these to try and get my helmet back in check. So once I had that all kind of traced out and figured out, then I started to kind of freehand the shape of the helmet that I wanted. Again, I used this guy here as my source reference for what I was drawing. I didn't do any measurements or anything like that. The whole thing was freehand. See, once I had that, I took it over, checked to make sure it was fit. At least it looked good inside the chest, and it did. So I used that same exact method now to get a front perspective. I only had to do half a head again because my template's going to be half a head. Yeah, I used the reference of both the crap helmet that I had made and the side profile that I had already drawn, and used them in kind of conjunction with each other to make a front profile of the helmet. Drew that all out in cardstock and then cut it out. Then once I had them, I transferred all that to cardboard, traced it onto the cardboard, cut all that out, and from there I had my front and side profiles, and it became my standard cardboard model template. I started cutting off all the excess junk that was on the paper template. So everything from the ears to the top, I just wanted to make the very bare bone shape of the actual helmet itself. So everything else had to go. So once I had all that cut off and I just had the bare bone shape of the helmet, came time to tape together both the side and front profile and start making a whole shape out of it. This just required a lot of scrap cardboard and a lot of duct tape. Yeah, so once I had the majority of the shape made out, I used the leftover cardstock I had downstairs and started filling in lots of the gaps in the cardboard, because when you lay down your plastic wrap, it has a tendency to kind of sink into those gaps, and I wanted this to be as like form-fitting as possible. That way I had no mistakes in my template. So I laid down a ton of cardstock and tried to have it fill in all the gaps. But once I got that completely covered in paper and tape, came time to make the actual duct tape template. So just like everything else before, gave the whole thing a couple layers of plastic wrap and then covered it in duct tape. 1 to 2 layers of duct tape, nothing crazy. And then to make sure I didn't mess anything up, I drew out where the eyes would be, using reference from the figure and my paper template that I had, just to try and make sure I got the eyes as best as I could. Outlined all the edges that would end up being around the center of the helmet and the edges and stuff. Then I cut off all the excess, pulled it from the mold, and then started working on separating everything out. Cutting the eyes out first, the little trim underneath around the eyes, and I tried keeping the front half at least to be one piece. Tried to at least. Still ended up having to cut everything up into several pieces because nothing was laying flat. It's such a complex bend, considering how it overlaps itself. It's not something you can get out of one piece. After that, it's the same as before. It's like we're repeating the whole thing over again, except this time we're not tracing my head. We're tracing this thing. So back into the cardstock, traced it all out in the cardstock, and then once I had all my pieces cut out, and transferred it all to foam. It's the same process all over again. Traced it to foam, cut it out, glued it together. And just like before, when I was gluing sections together, I tried to make sure I had everything kind of laid on the table in order. That way I knew what was connecting to what. Once they were all glued, started putting everything together. Let's see, there was a couple, there was, I think, only one angle cut on this, or in the base construction of the helmet, and that is right here in the eye opening. I don't really show it there, but so I'll zoom in here real quick. So this piece here, up against this one, these were both, I'm not sure, I can't remember if they were both 45-degree angles or only one of them was. I want to say they both were, because it looks very 90-degree if you see that. And then of course the top part here is going to have to rest on this inner piece. So yeah. So when it came time to gluing these together, I didn't have to do anything fancy on this side, because that is the actual, just the edge of this sheet of foam. And then I had that more or less glue right onto the inner piece here on the eye trim. All right, back to talking about gluing things together. Yeah, then assembled the back half, glued the two halves together once I had everything assembled, wrapped the mouth guard together, and then slammed the eyebrows on top of that. The end result looked pretty cool. I liked it. There was just one major problem, and that was that it was just way too big. I don't know why this keeps happening. I wish I could figure out why I keep doing this, but literally every time I've made a template so far, it turns out way bigger than this. So unless I'm just being stupid, so we're gonna learn together. How dumb am I? So, yes. Does that look the same to you? That looks the same to me, right? Fairly slim? You have no idea how much I had to cut this down. It was ridiculous. See, here's my theory too, because unless I'm remembering things wrong, which I'm very well may be remembering things wrong, because the last time I've done something like this was back in 2019 when I made the sister battle suit here and my Terminator chaplain all the way over there. That was the last time I freehanded like a full suit. I've done small stuff in between for Halloween and stuff like that, but because of the pandemic, like, that put a whole stink on a bunch of stuff, and I wasn't able to get a whole lot done. But what I always remember is that anytime you're dealing with thick foam, preferably, like, specifically like your 10mm stuff, floor mat foam, whatever, it tends to shrink, if that makes sense. Something about how thick it is, like, if you're referring to your template, it's more like your outside surface, and I don't know technically how that works on a physics level, but it's usually smaller because everything is like somehow tighter. Unless I'm just remembering things wrong, I might be, but it always makes things smaller. But this entire process so far, everything has turned out bigger. Not just a little bigger either, like a ton. Like, I'm not kidding when I say that I took off inches from this thing. Both front, back, center. It was nuts. Literally, let's get back to the video. I kept bringing everything in. I didn't want to bring in the visor, because that's going to start messing with the shape of the eyes and the nose, and that entire piece there. It was fairly complicated. Complicated in a sense that if I start trimming it, it's going to change the shape of it. So I wanted to keep that the way it was. So I started attacking everything else, from the sides, the back, the top center. I tried getting all that in, and every time I tried it, it was still too big. I took a whole inch off at a time to a half inch off at a time, and it was still too big. And it was frustrating for sure. And so I started laying up the original helmet with this one, and I kept like looking on side to side, because the one was form-fitting. It fit my head perfect. And the one based off of this was insanely huge. I mean, I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't stick out past my head a whole lot. So, how it happened, I have no idea. So, I had a genius idea after like my 5th attempt to do this. And I'm like, why don't I take the new helmet and just slice it down the middle? The inner piece that I had for the original one also has like a decent center line. So I'll slap the front visor on that, find out how much you need to cut from that, and then just glue it to it. And then do the same exact thing for the back. That's what I did this time around, and it worked. It got it like damn near perfect. Just, I don't know, something about it just seems so stupid, but it worked. The whole thing worked. Using that original template that I made for my head, and then using that later to kind of like get the exact shape needed for the new helmet that was going to be on the outside. I just split them both down the center, and then just kind of connected the front and back. But then that way I knew, like, when I went to glue the front half of the helmet into the front half of the visor, I knew how much was going to stick out extra, and then I could just cut that off, and then do the same for the back. Take the back half of the inner one, put it inside the outer. When I glued it, I knew how much excess there was around the edge. I knew how much to cut. Once they were both flush, I put them together. It fit snug, and it fit perfect. I haven't changed anything drastically, I think, out of that shape since. And then I put it inside the inside the gorget on the chest just to make sure everything was still proportionate, and it looked good. It looks good inside the gorget on the chest. So from there, I had my shape and size of the base of the helmet, and I was happy with what I had. So I was like, all right, that's all down. Let's start doing some detail, bring this thing to life a little bit. So I just took some duct tape, ran it along the back center just to get an idea of where the center piece of the helmet would be, whatever that vent is. I actually make it functional, and I cut the inside of it out. That way, hi Sable. That way hot air from my head has somewhere to escape. Not a lot, but a little bit. But I used duct tape then to make out templates for everything that was going to be on it, from the ear pieces, whatever the little piece on the cheek is, and the wraparound. Sable, no, you're not getting up there. This was mostly all freehand as well. I don't think I like grabbed a ruler and measured anything, except to make sure things were consistent. I can't remember what it was. It was like an inch and a half down the center, but according to the figure, it gets a little wider on the top than it is in the back. So there was a slight change in it. I think I went from like 1 inch to an inch and a half on both sides. So the way I kind of handled this is, I want to say it was, I did several layers of the same template piece. I'll kind of show what I mean, because you can kind of see it here, since nothing's primed or painted. Easiest way to see it here is underneath. So you can kind of see there's a layer here for this trim, and then a layer here. So that's 2 layers for this part that actually wraps around from here the whole way up. So as far as this goes, there's a slight bump on that as well. Yeah, so these 2 were either 8 or 10. And then this one here, for this outer piece here, that's probably 6 millimeters. And then this part here on the chin is also from the first layer. So the first layer is everything. Then the second layer is from the ear and back. And then the third layer of the 6 millimeter is just the ear. That way everything has volume to it. So back to the video, we'll see that's how we're actually doing this. There's no fancy angle cuts to these. They were also going to be straight. So I just did the same exact piece. I didn't have to flip the template or anything like that. Just use the same thing, because I could just flip the foam. It didn't matter. After I traced the first 2 pieces, I cut off the piece from the first layer, and then I traced it again. Did 2 of them, then then cut off what was needed after that, and just worked in layers. Then from that point, as I was trying to cut everything, it looks like Sable wanted a lot of attention and decided she was going to just sit on the foam and get very bitey. Play biting. She doesn't like bite. And then she just, if you have cats, you know exactly how these freaking monsters are. They want attention, and they want attention all the time. If you're doing something, you're not allowed to. You got to give them attention. So finally got her down and got back to work cutting everything out. So once I had that, I started gluing everything together. I made the not so smart decision, or the smart decision, I'm not entirely sure, to glue the 2 halves together first. It was a struggle to get it to line up, but I think in the end it probably was a smart idea to glue them together first, because I think otherwise, if I would have done one half and then done the other, it probably would not have lined up great down the center. As you can see, I'm just gluing the crap out of pretty much the whole helmet. What I should have done was traced it out first. That way I had a marker mark to reference to, because when I did go to put this on, it was a nightmare. Hi, Sable. Because there was so much contact cement, it literally started sticking to everything. And once it started sticking, I could not just get anything off. Luckily, I didn't damage anything. I almost did. But yeah, I used the old duct tape template to draw out, I think, where I wanted things. Once Once I finally had it on though, I realized that the top visor was a hair too short. I had to kind of make like a little filler piece. This was fine because Sable, she's gonna knock over everything. There you go. Go run on the table. No, you just gotta stalk. This is fine though because this gave me room to make the front part a little hollowed out. I'm still not super happy with the way this looks. I'm gonna try and fix this because it looks like it's bowed out too much, and I kind of want it to, I don't know, I'll try and clean it up somehow. But what this allowed me to do was it allowed me to make this front part hollowed out, and it'll let me take that hollowness out as far back as I want. The idea then was that I would cut the inside of that out, and that would allow some air to vent, or not air, but some heat to vent out. Because my end goal is I do want to put something in these eye sockets and light them up, and that means that they're gonna start fogging up real bad, and my head's gonna get hot. I'm gonna need a way to vent this out. I'll try and work on some other remedies as well. I'll probably have to ask around in some of the cosplay groups, as people who make these, how they keep their lenses from fogging up, because that's going to be an issue. Yeah, after that though, I did a little cleaning up on the inside just to make things easier, cut around the ears and stuff like that, just so it was easier to put on. I beveled out the bottom corners of the ear covers, because on the figure that I was kind of referencing how all that went, and it usually stopped right along the baseline of the of this outer edge piece. Yeah, so you can see the line would follow to this, and then that would angle down. I think it needs to come in a little bit more, but for now it's fine. Let's see. Yeah, from there then I started making the ear covers. This would help actually give the whole ear piece its shape. Just took a piece of scrap cardstock paper and just kept working out a shape until I got something that wrapped around fine-ish. I didn't do any fancy measuring. This is all freehand, so I just kept working at it. Eventually, once I did find something that I liked, I found out that I was going to have to trim the corners of the ear to get it to actually wrap around it better. Because the earpiece, it was like straight up and then round. I needed it to be fully round, just so that the ear cover could wrap around it better. But once I had the pieces cut out, it came time to glue everything on. Just made sure I gave everything a good layer, because that's going to be wrapped around tight and touching a lot of corners. I don't want anything to pop off. But then the last thing I had done to it so far, so I had cut out the eyes prior, and I was like, this will be fine. I already have these. This was traced from the template. I could just pop these out, and that'll be fit in the eye socket. That was a terrible idea. From everything being tugged and pulled in different directions, the eyes are actually a little bit smaller than this. So this wasn't doing anything. My idea was, for what I wanted, I'm probably not going to be able to pull it off that well here, but especially with the black marker that covers it up, but it sticks out just a little bit to kind of give it almost like a lip for the eyes. That was what I was going for, and this would have had everything back behind the openings and you wouldn't have seen anything, or at the very least it would have been flush, and I wanted to stick out just a little bit, give it a little bit more depth. In the end, when I go to do the actual lenses inside, my thought process is that it'll look almost like eyelashes or eyelids, if that makes any sense. Like, it'll make the eyes more pronounced, make it pop more, maybe, I don't know. I think what I had done was I took like paper or something and shoved it up inside the helmet, and then traced the opening, and then used that as my reference to make my templates for the new inner eye trims. I gave one more test fit to make sure everything looked fine, and I ran into an issue where my helmet was literally smacking off of everything. Not so much the gorget as it was the inner chest piece. So in my other video, let's see if I can get any lighting. Let's pop the head off of this guy. But yeah, okay. See this inner trim around the neck? When I was doing the unboxing video for this, I was like, that's kind of a neat detail. Maybe I'll incorporate that if I have the time. Well, I think I now know why they did that on this, and it was to make sure that the actual head of the character doesn't interfere either. So I'm like, okay, well, they did it, I'll do it. What I had done first when I was actually testing it on, I think it's in the video, but I'm probably already well past it, was so I had the chest on, I had the helmet on, and I was testing things around. I took a marker and held my head, like I'd turn my head this way, turn my head that way, and then I would trace around to see where I was actually touching. And then when I took the chest off and put it on the floor, I used that as reference to make the similar shape I saw in the figure, to kind of cut that opening up a little bit more, open things up. That way I wouldn't hit anything. I still hit a little bit, but it's nowhere near as bad as what it was, because before I would turn my head and my whole helmet would just get cockeyed, and then I would turn my head off, and yeah. So I gave it one more test fit, and everything fit great. It looked amazing. I shared this everywhere. It blew up on TikTok of all places for some reason. Well, blew up in a sense in terms of all my other videos get like 200 views, and this one, I think within like a day and a half, hit over 5,000. To me, that's huge. I don't know why, because I think it got like 100 views on YouTube. It's weird how that stuff works. But yeah, helmet is now in a decent stage. I'm insanely happy with where it's at. Obviously it needs work. It still needs some stuff done to it. So for example, I don't like this opening. I want to do something. You can definitely see like how the ends kind of bow outward. I don't like that. I want them to either be up or in. So either I need to trim something or just Dremel the crap out of it. I'll figure that out later. Obviously I have the eye LEDs. The eye trim on the inside, I can't really show it too much, but it is a little flimsy. I need to just take some hot glue and reinforce the inside of it. That'll take care of that. The vent holes, I want to take them farther back, just so I have more room for hot air to escape out here. That won't be enough to stop the visors from fogging up, but like I said, I'm going to try and ask around, see what other methods people have used before, see what can work for me. I have also, as you can see, I kind of cut out like a recess for the ears, so it's easier to slide on my head. I also want to be able to hear better. I've done this with some of my other suits. I might cut it deeper just so I have less foam insulating sound, so it's not so much like wearing earmuffs. You know, I'll be able to hear it a little better if there's less stuff insulating sound. It does need a lot of cleaning up, obviously. According to the figure, there's like rivets along the along the eyebrows, and then the black Templar cross on this figure is like on the side of the cheek. I do want that's actually another big thing. While that would be recessed, it wouldn't be open, and I need room to breathe. So this is a twofold issue. Actually, you know what? Let's bring the other guy out. All right, so this is the helmet from the Terminator Chaplain. Pretty cool, right? So let's see. So not only is the nose open, it's actually just on the, I'm not gonna be able to see it from the inside, which makes this kind of useless to show, but I'll talk about it anyway. The nose is actually open. Inside's just a real thin mesh so you can't see my nose when I'm wearing it. But that lets air, and it lets me breathe both in and out my nose. And then around the teeth, there's a lot of small gaps in between all these teeth. It's not just one big flat sheet. There's actually gaps between all of them. That allows air to get in and out as well. There's no mesh behind that because it's not really needed. It blocks so much light you don't see anything. But between those two, that lets a lot of air in and out, so I never have any issues. And then as far as the goggles go, there's no lenses. It's just a wire mesh, and that's it. The same mesh that is behind the nose to cover so you can't see my nose is also right up against the mesh on the inside here. So that helps block out or incoming light so no one can see my eyes or my face or anything like that. But this isn't a video about this thing, so that doesn't matter. But yeah, you can see I never opened up the top portion of this like I did that, but you can see that I like this. This looks better. I wish I could do something similar with that. I'll try and find a way to reference the two, maybe find a way to fix it. I'll address it somehow. It's not done yet. It's where it's at right now. Let's see, anything else to talk about helmet-wise? Not really, so we'll hype up the next video. Next video, we are building the backpack. It's in halfway construction right now. If I'm lucky, I can get most of it done tonight, but that'll be in the next episode, whenever that is. It's still early, but but I had covered the construction of its cardboard template in the last episode, so that might actually be an even shorter episode. That, or I'll do a quick recap of the construction of the cardboard thing. So yeah, I guess that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I never know how to end a video, because I don't think anyone ever gets to the end of these. If you do, you're probably one of the 10 people, so. Alright, see you in the next one.